Everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Carly Latero with the Spring Creek Project for Ideas, Nature, and the Written Word. As many of you know, the challenge of the Spring Creek Project is to bring together the practical wisdom of environmental sciences, the clarity of philosophy, and the creative, expressive power of the written word to understand and reimagine our relation to the natural world. And our office is just a little bit up across campus from here, and we really celebrated every time one of you registered. So we're so happy that you're here, and we're looking forward to spending the afternoon with you. I'd also like to thank Spring Creek Project's program coordinator, Shelley Stonebrook, who many of you probably met as you were coming in. Events like these take a lot of big picture thinking, but also so many, just all these details in the planning. And Shelley does both of those things with so much grace and creativity, and we're really lucky to have you. I'd also like to thank Emily, who is here behind Shelley. Emily Grubby is finishing up her 2-year internship with Spring Creek Project, and she's going to be graduating in just about a month with her master's degree in environmental arts and humanities. She has been key in all kinds of things for Spring Creek, and especially today in developing the Literature and Film Festival. 2 other students are volunteering today. Wolke, I think, is still out at the table, but he is a student in the Environmental Arts and Humanities program too, and he helped a lot with getting the word out and obviously with welcoming a lot of you today. And then Christina Beggins in the back there, trying to get all of this recorded as best as we can today, so thank you for that. Thanks too to all of the organizations that were in the Community Climate Fair. They'll be here for the rest of the day, so please stop by and say hello during the breaks and during the community reception this evening if you haven't gotten a chance to do that. And thanks also to all of the other organizations who helped get the word out about the symposium, and to all of you who told your friends. 50% of you said that you heard about today by word of mouth or through another organization, which is kind of unheard of for a gathering like this. So we really appreciate what all of you did to invite people here today. And special thanks to the Sunrise Movement for co-sponsoring today. And thanks to everybody who volunteered to be a discussion leader and note taker during the community fair or the reception. We really appreciate your willingness to do that. Thanks to Grassroots Books and Music, who is going to be here later today to sell books by some of our keynote speakers and workshop leaders, and to the great staff at LaSalle's for creating a welcoming environment and helping with endless tech questions. And to Campus Recycling, who is helping us to make this as close to a zero waste event as we can. Sarah Power and Lily Butler also volunteered to help this evening to make sure that we get compost in the right bin and recycling and a little bit of waste in the other bins. I want to give thanks and acknowledge the land that we're gathering on today. Corvallis is a place that carries a very complicated and layered history. For thousands of years, the Marys River or Ampinafu band of the Kalapuya have been in relationship and kinship with this land. And after several hundred years, several hundred years ago, European settlers colonized the land that the state of Oregon and Oregon State University occupies. The United States land seizures were a project of spiritual destruction that denied the Kalapuya free and unhindered access to the land that really fundamentally shapes their identity and their spirituality. Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to reservations in Western Oregon after the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855. And today, living descendants of these people are part of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. So from what we understand, the Ampinafu band of the Kalapuya called this land that we're gathered on today Champinafu, or the place of the blue elderberry. Kalapuya tribal members traveled to areas around what is now Corvallis to harvest these elderberries. And Spring Creek Project pays tribute to the past, present, and future members of the Confederated Tribes by planting blue elderberry on the land that we care for along the Shotpouch Creek, which runs off the Marys Peak and is part of our watershed here in Corvallis. When we first started imagining the symposium, it was December, which really isn't much time at all to bring something like this together. And there were moments where we just thought that we couldn't do it and that there simply wasn't enough time. But we kept coming back to the spirit of the symposium, and that's exactly the point, that there isn't enough time, and that we have to do what we can quickly and differently than we've done things before. And so I invite all of you to come today with that similar spirit. When I first read the Intergovernmental Panel report on climate change, or the IPCC report, as many of you know it, I was stunned. I had thought, maybe like many of you, that we had decades to make this transition away from fossil fuels, but scientists from around the world gave us this very clear warning that we have about a decade to drastically reduce emissions to avoid the catastrophic effects of really irreversible climate change. You all know what we're up against, and you all know what we're fighting for, but if you're like me, you might not be exactly sure what to do yet, given all the news that we get every day. Or if you do know what to do, you might not yet know how to do it or who to do it with. And so that's exactly what we're coming together to do today, to imagine what we can do, how we can do it, and who we're going to do it with. And we're turning to this, what I think of as a really astonishing metamorphosis of caterpillars as our guide. Caterpillars, as you know, are moth and butterfly larvae, and they grow by shedding their skin. When a caterpillar is done growing, it sheds its skin one last time, and that new, smooth outer skin hardens to form a chrysalis. So already this metaphor, I think, is working pretty well for us. There's a time in a caterpillar's life where it stops growing, when a biological sign says, that's enough growth, it's time to rest and to reconfigure. And the caterpillar has also evolved to grow a thick outer skin that she needs to go through this really profound transformation. And again here, I think this might serve as our guide to steel ourselves for the work that we know we have ahead. There are so many amazing things about what is happening during this metamorphosis, but one of them is that the caterpillar enters this chrysalis phase with everything that she needs to undergo this transformation into a butterfly. And so today, I'm inviting all of us here to imagine this building and this room and everyone that we're sitting next to as enough to fuel the transformation that we need to go through. Let's imagine that everything is cocooned in here with us. All the things that we're really confident that we're good at already, and all the things that have held you back over the years, like not being sure what to do, feeling like an introvert, feeling like you don't have enough money or time or information or whatever it is to act. It's all in here with us today, and it's hopefully going to provide the sustenance that we'll need to emerge from the symposium changed. And when a moth or butterfly emerges from its chrysalis, she isn't ready to fly right away. Her wings are crumpled, and she needs to hang upside down and pump fluid from her abdomen through her veins into her wings so that they can straighten and harden. We've probably all had that feeling where we've just undergone some sort of transformation, or you've learned something new, or you've met something new, or you've had that moment where you have this clear vision of what's coming next in your life and felt the vulnerability of that newness. And so this is where I think our community can sustain us and maybe even protect us for a little while our wings dry and we figure out how to use them. On average, it takes a moth or a caterpillar a couple weeks to go through this stage. And of course, the change that we need to go through isn't going to happen today, personally, or as a community, or as a society. And so I invite you to think about other chrysalis gatherings that you'll need to have in various forms in the weeks and months and years ahead. Maybe those are staff meetings, maybe they're board meetings, maybe they're community dinners, whatever it is, you know how to do it. So we've tried to schedule a lot of time to be in community with each other today. So rather than having a Q&A after each speaker, we've built in longer breaks. We've built in time for you to connect with the speakers during the workshops and also during the community reception tonight. Also in your program, each one of you has a flight path on the back of it. And we invite you to use that space to write down, if somebody says something and you want to connect with them later, jot down their name or contact information. Since we know you're not going to be able to make all the connections you need today, we hope you'll use that as you're going forward. So very briefly, here's our plan for today. We're going to start with 3 keynotes, and then we'll head into the workshop sessions. Those sessions are all in the rooms where the fair was when you first arrived. If you don't remember what workshop session you signed up for, there's a list on the check-in table as you're arriving, and there's also one posted in the main hall there so that you can look it up by your first name. I think it's alphabetized by first name. Feel free to change workshops if whatever you registered for isn't still resonating with you today, except for the ethics at the edge of the apocalypse. That is full. During each workshop session, we're going to have a literature and film festival in this room. The festival is going to repeat, so you don't want to come to it twice. And then after those 2 workshop sessions, we're going to meet back in here for our last 2 keynote speakers with Mary DeMacher and Emily Johnston. And then immediately after that, we're going to head out into the hall for a community reception. There'll be a really beautiful spread of free food with smoked salmon and lots of vegetarian and gluten-free options. And we'll also have a bar there with local wine and beer and cider for purchase. And that's where we'll do our community discussions. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about those when we get together after the break. If you need anything today, Shelley, Emily, Wolke, and I have these yellow name tags on, so it's a little bit easier to find us. Please let us know if we can help with anything. And now I'm going to hand it over to Shelley.
Thank you so much, Carly, for that thoughtful welcome. Oh, sorry, this mic's not on. This one is. Thank you so much, Carly, for that thoughtful welcome and for all you've done to make today possible. And thank you all for being here. One aspect of what we're doing here today is thinking about how each of us might step out of our comfort zones or do the unexpected or do something that seems really hard. I'm so honored to be introducing our first speaker, Jamie Margolin, because she has stepped up in a way and at a time in her life that can inspire all of us. While many of her fellow high school students have been focused on homework and hangout time with friends, Jamie has helped spearhead an international youth climate movement. She's a 17-year-old climate justice activist, and when she was 15, she founded the youth climate action organization 0 Hour, which led the first ever youth climate march in Washington, D.C., and 25 other cities around the world. She is 0 Hour's executive director, and she is joining a chorus of youth voices that are rising up around the world, changing the climate movement and holding adults and elected officials accountable. Jamie was recently featured in Rolling Stone magazine for her climate justice work, and she's currently writing her debut book about being a youth activist, which is due out next year. Please join me in welcoming Jamie Margolin.
This on real quick. 1 second. Hey, how is every? This is not gonna work. Okay, how is everyone today? Good. Okay. So as she said, my name is Jamie. I'm 17 years old. I'm a junior in high school. I just took my SAT yesterday in the morning. Horrible. Horrible experience. I hate it so much. And through the college process and being a junior in high school, I'm also a youth climate activist, not because it's a fun extracurricular, not because I need something for my resume, not because I'm bored and I don't have anything better to do, but because my life and the life of all of those in my generation depend on it. I found myself in a very weird time to be alive, where I am old enough to understand what's happening with the climate crisis and understand that I am living in a world of ifs, so I cannot plan for my future. I understand that I cannot say, I really want to see this place, this beautiful natural place someday. I really want to be this when I grow up. I really want to enjoy this place when I grow up because it won't be there when I grow up. And so I've known that from a very young age, that everything is temporary that I enjoy when I look at natural beauty, when I look at like my beautiful Pacific Northwest home where I live up in Seattle, I know that it's temporary and that I won't be able to enjoy it for much longer. But I'm also too young to vote currently and too young to have an actual seat in power in politics or in the private sector to actually like change these systems that have caused the climate crisis. And so that leaves young people today, Generation Z, is in this very terrifying place where we know what's happening to us. We fully understand the fear a lot better than those in power, and we fully feel it, and we know we're gonna live to experience it, but we do not have the political power to be the ones to change it. And so that is a very stressful thing to carry as a 17-year-old, as a 14-year-old, as a young person, because my entire life being in high school, my entire life is just preparing for a future, going to class, taking the SAT, putting yourself through all of these. I have an AP exam tomorrow morning. Putting yourself through all of these exams, homework, schoolwork, it's all preparing for something, but I've kind of lost motivation because it's preparing for something that doesn't exist. And so I'm studying, and that this has been the dilemma that a lot of young people are facing, is that we're studying, we're preparing, we're working for something that does not exist. And for a while, I didn't know what to do with that energy, and I didn't know what to do with that fear. I would just kind of sit there, and my teacher would be like, you know, school comes first, finish your algebra, and I'll be like, great, everything is dying, but okay, I'll do my algebra. And so this kind of culminated in about 2016, after the presidential elections went not in the way that I was hoping for, and not in the way that a lot of us were hoping for. So I was still going through this phase in my life where climate change was something so scary to me, so real, that I didn't want to think about it or do anything with it. Like, whenever there was NPR and there was a story about climate change, I would turn it off. There was a documentary about climate change. I don't want to hear it because I know there's nothing new that I'm going to learn. I know what's happening, but it's so terrifying that I didn't want to think about it. I just wanted to shut it all out. And a part of me knew that like the Obama administration had not been doing sufficient action on climate at all. In fact, they were laying pipeline. Indigenous activists at Standing Rock literally had to like put their bodies on the line to get that administration to condone the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, but now this administration built it or allowed it to go through. So I knew deep down that like nothing was enough. But it wasn't until 2016 when I saw someone who was a blatant climate denier, just blatantly hostile towards my generation and youth, that I realized that I really had to step it up. And so I started getting involved in my local community. I was about 14 years old. I ran around Capitol Hill and Olympia lobbying representatives. We were a bunch of like little kids with this organization called Plant for the Planet in Seattle, and we would run around with little bill like sheets to get different representatives to endorse bills, and we would run up and down the steps of the Capitol building in Olympia, and we would try to get bills passed, and we were like knocking down the doors of different politicians, going up and down stairs all around the entire Capitol, testifying at bill hearings. I was one of the oldest people there when I was 14, and so the oldest of the youth activists, a lot of them, I was like driving this little 7-year-old kid, like, who was like, okay, which way do we go? I had to kind of like babysit at the same time as I was working, like these were young kids who knew what was happening, and like 12-year-olds, everyone. And we were doing this work for so long in our local community in Seattle, trying to get something done. And no one was really paying attention to us. There was no coverage, there was no, we were working so hard and I was sacrificing so much. And before this, I was like a straight A, top of the class student. Everyone, I was just associated. Jamie, good student. And I started to lose that reputation because I had to do so much work in my community, so much work for the climate crisis. Like, I'm not failing school or anything, but I wasn't like top of the class anymore, and my grades were dipping, and I had to like blow off my friends a bunch in class because I was kind of like huddled in a corner calling my state senator, just like, I set up a call with him at lunch, and I kind of had to hide in like the costume closet of my school behind the theater area. So I was just kind of like this, calling my representatives, and that was my life through mid-freshman year. And nothing was happening, and we were all working so hard, and we were all sacrificing so much and missing out on so many experiences that young people should have. And so eventually I felt like something bigger needed to happen, like there had to be more. We had to be doing more, but I couldn't figure out what to do, and it wasn't like exactly we had all the funding and resources and time in the world. I was still struggling to keep afloat with my classes, being in a very rigorous high school. And then the summer of 2017 happened, and in Seattle, I think the wildfire smoke made its way down to Oregon too, right? This past summer? Yeah, it made its way down. In Seattle, we're even closer to Canada, so it was like even more like, it was like Beijing, China, up there this past summer. No, not this, so 2017 was the first time that I had experienced poor air quality where I live. In the Pacific Northwest, we're known for like, you know, crisp, clean air, like it's pretty, it's fresh, it's the Pacific Northwest, like, and that was the first time that going outside made me sick. So for like the 2 weeks in Seattle in 2017, it was like the weather forecasts were projecting that the air quality was worse than Beijing, China, which is what you look at when you're talking about bad air quality. And so that was really bad. And I had a lot of friends with respiratory illnesses that like, literally, like I'm a person who's able-bodied, and I was getting headaches and feeling just crappy and sick and tired and just depressed. And that's coming from an able-bodied person. But my friends with chronic illnesses, my friends with asthma, anyone who has any sort of disability, health problem, like they were really feeling it. They had to go to the ER. They were like driving down to like Oregon and search for clean air, but they didn't find any down here either. And so that plus in 2017, it was like these massive like series of once in a 500-year hurricanes, or it was Hurricane Maria, and then the destruction of like all these like islands and all sorts of just constant hurricane storms, floods. Hurricane Harvey hit Houston really hard, and the media was just talking about it like, oh, that's bad, I guess, cool. And then they would just report, they would just stand there in the wind like, this is a bad hurricane and people are dying. And they would not connect the dots to climate change. They would not connect the dots to these fossil fuel industries. You know, they always name hurricanes such cutesy names like Maria and Harvey. They should be naming them Shell, Exxon. Hurricane Monsanto should be the name of these next ones. And so they were naming all these hurricanes, like these cutesy names, just talking about like standing in the rain with their like the hurricane happening behind them, and it was just not the action that needed to be happening. And so at that time I was 15, and I was like, we have to do something further because no one is listening to us, and we're working our butts off here, and no one's listening to us. And so I posted on my social media that I think that there had to be like a big youth climate march, like big youth climate mobilizations for people to hear from the young people who might not have the political power, but are the ones inheriting this mess, that we need to take action now. And this was before Greta Thunberg started her strike. This was before the Extinction Rebellion. This was before this was before the Green New Deal took off, before Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, before like this whole new amazing climate movement that we find ourselves on, of this big, giant, amazing global climate action family. This was before all of that. And there was no attention put on that. And so we had to build the momentum ourselves. And so I posted online, like, there needs to be a youth climate march, and we needed to mobilize, and we need to put pressure on our leaders and make them understand that we do not deserve such a terrible future. And if they really love us, if these people, these politicians who are, you know, how they have those political ads where they have the baby that they're holding, like, look at me, I'm interacting with a small child, you should elect me. These same people who are actively destroying and killing the future for their children, and that's not love. So we came up with this, a lot of people started responding to that post and saying like, yeah, I agree, and I had a bunch of internet friends, and so we came together and we started this organization called 0 Hour, because this is 0 hour to act on climate change. And we came up with that clock logo and this whole movement based on no more time, and this emergency movement led by young people, majority young women. Most of our team is young women of color, a diverse intersectional youth climate action movement demanding that we get to the roots of climate change and take action now. And so, in the summer of 2018, so we had to organize for an entire year before the Youth Climate March because, like I said, none of that momentum was there. We had to build it ourselves and do a lot of grassroots work, do a lot of work with different communities. We connected with the youth at Standing Rock who started the No Dakota Access Pipeline movement, who are some of our inspirations, like Jacelyn Charger, Tokata Iron Eyes, Danny Grassrope, and we organized young people from all around the country for an entire year. We had no funding, barely any funding until like the last minute, and even then it was like bare bones. No clout, no nothing. I do not come from a powerful political family or a particularly engaged family that has a lot of political connections. No one on our team did. We were just a bunch of scrappy little young girls, because most of us were girls, who just saw this emergency. But we were able to put together this Youth Climate March on July 21st of 2018 in Washington, D.C. and 25 cities around the world. And we didn't just march. We came up with so one of our members at the time was a refugee from a country that has a lot of mineral extraction, the Congo, where there's a lot of mineral extraction from the climate crisis happening. And he and a lot of other young people from the Frontlines connected with the youth at Standing Rock and other youth to write a comprehensive platform of what we, the young people, need in order to have a livable future, not what is politically feasible. Because where I live in Washington State, we have a lot of politicians who we're #green politicians, and but they're talking green, but then they're building new methanol plants and they're building new oil refineries. And on my way driving here, I passed the Kalama methanol, so there's a lot of hypocrisy happening. And so part of this movement, the Zero Hour movement, is calling out, pardon my language, but calling out bullshit when we see it from both sides, because, and the Zero Hour message is all about holding everyone accountable, because like where I live, all these supposed green politicians are building all of these new fossil fuel infrastructure, a lot of times on indigenous land up in Washington State and in the Pacific Northwest. And so we addressed all of this. We had a lobby day the day before the march. That's us with Bernie Sanders. We met with a few other politicians. And it was pouring rain the day of the march. It was absolutely the most wet I had been in my entire life. When I stand in the shower, I'm not as wet as it was that day. I'm serious. I took a shower this morning. Still wasn't as wet as it was like the most torrential downpour where everything is soaked. You wring out your shirt, and the youth still showed up. That's a picture of Havana, our youngest speaker. That's us marching in the rain. That's me and Tokata Iron Eyes, who is one of the leaders of the Standing Rock movement, leading with us. The march was historic not only because it was like truly youth-led and organized, and it was it was not your generic, like, if you notice our branding colors of our logo are not blue and green in your typical like old school environmental movement colors. They're the colors of an emergency, of bright orange, and so we had come up with this like brand new strong movement of young people, and it was so historic because it was also led by young people who were on the front lines of the climate crisis. We worked to get a lot of indigenous youth from the reservation to our march so they could be there and help lead it. We worked on getting a lot of, we had organizers going to a lot of communities in DC that are often underserved, and like making so the people who attended our march in the rain brought out the real ones. So we had, because on social media, the movement was getting traction and in the media, and all of us were like cramped in this one tiny house for about 2 weeks in DC, pre-organizing, like 30 of us, like doing last-minute recruitment work, all the stuff that goes behind a mobilization. And the cast of the Avengers and like Black Panther and like a bunch of celebrities were tweeting about us, which is cool and all, but it's like, we'll get into that later. And it was amazing because a radical message of like intersectional climate justice and youth-led justice was reaching the mainstream. But we got all this social media hype, but then when it was raining and the people didn't want to come out, the people who did come out were these youth from the front lines who were willing to brave the rain with us. The real ones came out. They stood out in the rain. We had like these beautiful signs that just got completely soaked and like the paint was kind of dripping a little. But they were the ones who showed up, and so it really showed the resilience and strength of young people. And so ever since that movement, and these are just some of the guiding principles of the 0 Hour movement, what we work towards. And so now, at first, when we were standing in the rain in that pouring cold, in the pouring rain in the middle of July for some reason in DC, we kind of went back to the house that we were staying at, all like cold and wet and just kind of like covered in stuff after carrying a bunch of like supplies back to the house. And we were like, what if that didn't do anything? Like we just kind of all had like an existential crisis of like, oh man, we spent like a whole year, we sacrificed all of our grade point averages dropped. Everyone worked so hard. What if nothing comes out of this? The next day there was a spread in the Sunday New York Times about the work that we did. And then a few months later, actually it was 1 month later, not even a month, like a few weeks later, I got a message from this girl from Sweden named Greta Thunberg, saying that the work the 0 Hour had done was really inspiring to her, and like after seeing what March for Our Lives did and what 0 Hour did, and plus her own worries and concerns about the climate crisis, and that, like I'm not claiming credit on that, like she had her own motivations as well. Like she was starting this strike, no one was listening at the time, and so I was like tweeting about it, writing about it, like this is so cool. 0 Hour started amplifying the strike, and we watched this movement, we watched this movement completely blow up. Within the past like couple of months, it was crazy. I remember just a few months ago, she was DMing me like, hey, if you have the time to check your email, like maybe DM, maybe like, and then now there's Nobel Prize winning this movement. So this momentum that we had been building that we thought was for nothing ended up being one of, and let me make this clear that we didn't completely start anything. Like we were also working off the shoulders of the Standing Rock movement and the youth who started the Standing Rock movement. So it was like this chain of inspiration where we were inspired by the kids at Standing Rock, and we based our movement, and we were inspired by those kids, and then we did our thing, and then the climate strike kids were inspired by us, and then there are more movements that are inspired by that, and so it's like all these movements are growing on top of each other and inspiring each other and building. And so now, 0 Hour is working towards our next event, which is a Youth Climate Action Summit in Miami, Florida this summer, because right now Miami is going to be underwater soon, and you notice that a lot of these climate events happen in DC, New York, LA, I think it was San Francisco, and like that's about it. But they don't actually go to the places where, excuse me, they don't actually go to the places where people are all on the front lines and people are losing their homes and that are soon going to be destroyed by this crisis. And so we're going there. We're going to be working with Extinction Rebellion, Fridays for Future, all of these other movements on having sister actions all over the country and world. So while we're there doing this summit in Miami and doing other actions around the summit in Miami, everyone in their communities can organize their own movement. So it's going to be July 12th through the 14th, and we're going to make the world stop for climate action July 12th through 14th. So you can follow us on social media, or just go to thisis0hour.org to find out about Miami, to sign up. And now that I said that, and we're working so hard, and I have officially lost my my position as like a excellent student, and because of all my climate work, like I'm okay, but I've officially lost like that priority, and now it's climate work, full-time job all the time for me and many young people all over the country. It goes to where can you help and what do you do now? Because even though there have been upsides and there have been downsides with the growth of this youth climate movement, and the upsides are obvious. People are finally listening to us. People are valuing our voices, listening to the words we have to say, giving us platforms. But the downside is that people are putting it on our shoulders to fix. And we don't have the power to do that. Our power, the power of young people, and this is what I'm going to be writing about a lot in my book that comes out in the fall of 2020. The power of young people is to call out BS. We hold the moral high ground on a lot of issues, so our power comes in calling out those in power, but we do not have the power to make the laws. And a lot of times leaders are putting it on us. Like I'll get compliments from people, from politicians in power who have the power right now to make action and save us. It's like, oh, what you're doing is so great. Like, you're gonna save the world. Like, someday maybe you can be a governor. And I'm like, but you're the governor right now. Why don't you take action? I'm serious. And they'll be like, oh my God, that's so inspirational. Are you going to run for office when you're older? And I'm like, yes, if this is still above water. And so that's the thing. That's thing number one. Thing number one to not say to young activists and to keep in mind is we're not here to just be like an inspirational story that you retweet, that you put pressure on to fix everything, because that's a lot of pressure. I'm trying to survive the college application process. The SAT was horrific, and we still are, and I'm still a kid and trying to grow up, and that's the same for a lot of youth. And a lot of youth, I come from a background of a lot of privilege, and there are a lot of young people who are working, like they have to help support their families, and they're going through a lot of trauma or whatever, and to just throw fixing this on our shoulders is completely unfair. This is what I always say. Don't just report that kids are marching or kids are protesting. Listen to what we're actually saying and act on it versus like, oh look, there are kids in the street, how cool, that's a good news story. Like, listen to what we're actually saying and listen and do it. That's thing number one. Thing number two, thing number two is when it comes to funding. A lot of times people will be quick to pull out their phones and tweet, take a picture, make this whole fanfare about young activism, but when it comes to actually funding our work, especially when it's young activists of color and when it's frontline communities and all of these other communities, like the more marginalized you get, like suddenly these same people who are tweeting about you will not even give a penny to your organization, and so it'll be kind of be like, oh, that's cool, good luck, and so they'll be trying to. So we have like young people. Our finance director is 15. She just turned 16. She single-handedly, pretty much her and her team single-handedly raised $80,000 for our march by applying to grants. She faked being sick and like in school, so she could be in a nurse's office and apply for a $16,000 grant that we got. And you can read about this in the New York Times story. They do a whole feature on her. It's hilarious. But she's still like working her butt off. Like on the way here, I was on the call. Like, okay, what about this grant? What about this grant? Like and that may seem like 80,000 is like a lot. May seem like a lot, but when it's like a mass mobilization in 25 cities around the world, it's not actually that much. But it was sufficient. Like it was a shoestring budget, and it all came in last minute, and we had to like fight for that money, like more than normal organizations would. Like we had to fight with people who were sitting on millions and millions of dollars, who suddenly are broke when we talk to them. Like suddenly they're beggars and they don't have any money. When young people, especially a movement with young women of color, ask them for funding. And so now with Miami coming up in our actions, I've talked to a lot of organizations, philanthropists, celebrities who will be happy to tweet, but when it comes to actually funding young people, suddenly sorry, bye. And so those are the two main things that need to change if you as adults want to support the youth climate movement, is don't throw everything on us. Use the power that you have and acknowledge what we're saying and give us power, but don't throw it on us. We're just still kids to solve this for you. We're doing the best we can, but there's only so much we can do. And second is, if you have money, consider actually donating, not just to 0 Hour. You can go to thisiszerohour.org to fund the work we do. And we were really struggling to raise money for the summit in Miami. So the more you can donate, that would be amazing, but not just to 0 Hour, but to a lot of frontline organizations. A lot of times the groups that are doing like the real work that needs funding are not the ones that you see in the news or you see on the internet. The first thing you pull up, they're not the CR clubs, the 350s. We're friends with them and everything. They're the grassroots organizations. They're Uprose, the Standing Rock movement. They're indigenous young people. They're young people of color in their communities working hard with little to no funding. And the grassroots is where the real work happens, and yet that's not where the money's going. All the money's going to the grass tops and like kind of trickling down a little bit to the grassroots, which is not a very good system because it's been proven like every single movement that has carried us to success is the money and the funding and the real work that happened was in the grassroots. Where are the pipelines being stopped? On reservations, on places where people are literally putting their bodies in front of pipelines. They're doing that with no funding whatsoever. We pulled off the Youth Climate March, and I'm not equating us to Frontline because like I am not a Frontline youth. Like I have a lot of privilege in this crisis. But those two youth movements and Frontline movements, we do so much with so little. And so I just want you to imagine. I'm out of time, but I just want you to imagine if we, the 0 Hour Youth, could do so much with the tiny shoestring budget that we barely pulled together. If the youth at Standing Rock and the youth in so many places could do so much with the minimal funding that they have, imagine what we could do if we were actually supported and funded properly. Like we could really do amazing things. So that's it for me.